The Dallas Cowboys made a huge mistake last offseason. And no, I'm not talking about trading Micah Parsons. We'll tell you what it is next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to talk about Jonathan Gannon getting a second interview with the Cowboys. We're going to talk about a sneaky candidate that is quickly emerging as a serious contender. But I want to start with this. We just watched some awesome playoff football in the divisional round. And as I'm sitting there and I'm watching Mike McDonald look awesome with the Seahawks, I saw Sean Payton, who, just a couple of years ago joined Denver, now has the Broncos as the #1 seed in the AFC. And you look at Mike Vrabel, who his team is in the AFC Championship game. And then you look at Ben Johnson, who probably should have had the Bears in the NFC Championship game. Did the Cowboys make a mistake by not even interviewing Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson during the cycle last year?
I think the answer is yes, because I think the answer is that they should have at least brought these guys in and had conversations. Now, maybe part of the reason is some of those guys wouldn't have accepted interviews with the Cowboys. I don't know. But I think if the general thought process is that, should you be casting a deeper and wider net in these interviews? I think absolutely the answer is yes. I don't know that the Cowboys suffered a ton because I think that they got a good coach in Brian Schottenheimer. And I do think that your point being that those two guys are in these playoff games, the Cowboys are not, stands. But I think overall, to the point, yes, should they have made more interview questions? Was the process flawed last year? And maybe they got a good situation despite that. I think that certainly falls into the realm of possibility. And it certainly is. It's true that they needed to interview more candidates. And I'm hoping that this is them showing us that they're course correcting that problem.
It's just when you get to these big postseason games, coaching becomes more important than ever before. And we can dissect Mike Vrabel's job that he's done with New England. I think there is some schedule luck in there. It also helps to be playing in the AFC. I'm just going to say that right now. And then Ben Johnson, I mean, he had a really, he walked into a pretty decent situation. He clearly has his, blueprints of how he wants to build this team. But those were the top two guys of the cycle. I think Liam Cohen was the next, highest rated guy. And the Cowboys had no interest in talking to those guys. And I think that's what's so frustrating is I think Jerry Jones in the front office has always operated, at least since Bill Parcells, that the coach doesn't matter all that much. And that's why they haven't attracted these big name coaches or really went out and spent a lot of money on the coaching staff. I just wonder if it's time to really reevaluate that philosophy and that strategy.
See, I view it differently. I think that their fault is certainly there, but I don't view it as they don't think the coach matters. I just think that they view as the minimum requirements to be these coaches are different, and I think that that's ultimately what's changed a lot, and that's what kind of ruled out guys like Liam Cohen and some of these others initially. And I think the reason that Schottenheimer kind of snuck through that is because they knew Schottenheimer. Right. And I think that that's the lesson is that you can't make these arbitrary rules when you're making these interviews and you're trying to find the best candidate for the job, because the best candidate may not meet these necessary requirements. And I think we've seen year in, year out, and especially this year, that the guys that you kind of pre-disqualified for the job clearly were good coaching candidates. Yeah. So, I think if anything, it's been an issue of just holding the job in such high regard that you think that only experienced head coaches can take the job, and only it's different now because we're talking about a defensive coordinator, but I think even then when they were doing the head coaching job, it was more about like holding this crazy high standard to being able to hold the Dallas Cowboys job instead of just going out and looking for someone who could be the best at being a head coach of a football team.
And I try to think about how I want to say this. I don't think Jerry Jones has had an appetite to go out and hire, let's call them the whiz kids, right? The Mike McDonald,
specifically, right?
Yeah, the Liam Cohens and the Ben Johnsons. I think the Mike Vrabel situation is a little different because I'm not even sure if the Cowboys would have requested Mike Vrabel, that he even would have interviewed here, because frankly, I don't think he would have put up with the front office. I don't think he would have but I also think it was a perfect situation for him in New England, that he was, as long as that New England job was open and available to him, I think he was going to take it regardless. So we could actually maybe, exclude him a little bit, but I do think it's worth mentioning that we never heard any bit of interest there.
Well, I mean, we also got to go back and remember what the environment was around like back then. And like, I think most of the Cowboys nation was screaming exclusively, no more coaching retreads, So I think that's part of that was,
it's fair, right?
I think that part of this is that they didn't get into that because they didn't want to have to give off. Once they identified Schottenheimer was they're a candidate for head coach, I think they just wanted to continue to string it out. So why inflame the Cowboys fandom by going out and putting out names they weren't even necessarily going to interview? So
one last thing, I just let me complain for a minute.
100. No, you're right to complain. Let me be clear. The process is bad. I'm saying that the result may not have been so bad, but the Cowboys have gotten away with that for years. Like, that's what 100%. The Cowboys have constantly.
And I know this is very arbitrary, so please forgive me. We just got done watching 2 games on Sunday. Now, they were sloppy. Like there was a bunch of turnovers in both games. But one thing I think you can say about all 4 teams, that there's a general toughness about all of them, right? I think even the Bears are pretty bad on defense. They've gotten a lot of turnovers, but man, they had multiple big time stops, and they were flying to the football, and they were making tackles. The Rams defense, they've got a couple good players up front, but that is not an overly talented group, and they make every single tackle. It seems like this is one thing I would love for Schottenheimer to be able to change. I don't even know if he can. I think the Cowboys need to develop some kind of toughness where you can go out and play on the road in bad weather and not have it affect you that much. They just haven't had that in years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the step that this specifically, like, let's talk about the offensive line. It feels like needs to take next year, right? The defense, we need to instill that in whoever our head coaching is, and like that's, our defensive coordinator is, like, that's just going to be part of this change of culture on that whole side of the ball. But on the part of the ball that actually dictates how things go in the offense, like, it specifically has got to start with this young offensive line. I need to see Tyler Booker take this offensive line up a step with his leadership. I think it's time for Riley to kind of help these guys grow a little bit. And I think in a year or two of Clayton Adams and Riley, I'm hoping it starts up front. It starts with the attitude up front and how you block and how you finish folks. And I think it permeates from that. And then, obviously on the defensive side, it's just got to be fundamental, like in the bedrock of whatever new defense you're building.
And listen, not a spoiler, but I've been watching a lot of draft tape over the last couple of weeks. Surprise, surprise. And every time I watch these guys, I'm like, man, I just want some tough football players. And there's a couple guys in this class, and I'll mention Mansour Delane from LSU. It's not the biggest, doesn't have the longest arms, doesn't run particularly fast, but the guy's just a football player. And it feels like when the Cowboys lost Jordan Lewis on defense last year, they really lacked any kind of attitude like that. They need to find more players like that if they ever want to be considered a tough physical football team.
Keontae Scott from Miami.
Perfect example. He had a 29-year-old rookie cornerback. Awesome. Give it to me.
He's ready to play, buddy. He's ready to play. True. He's aged. He's well aged.
There you go. All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' ongoing defensive coordinator search. And let's talk about Jonathan Gannon, because it feels like Cowboys Nation is maybe overreacting a little bit here. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate QB. The draft picks are set. We know where everybody's going to be drafting. There's going to be probably 20 teams looking for a franchise quarterback. Do you ever wish that you could be drafted by your favorite team? Well, now you can, and there's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number one draft pick, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. You're going to deal with all the ups and downs of a quarterback career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you just want to sneak in a game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special for you guys. Use promo code LOCKEDON in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend, QB1, it's your legacy. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment with Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where it feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now is the perfect time to close it out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups through player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. Prize Picks is incredibly easy to get started. You just pick two or more players and choose more or less on their player projections. So go download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. If you haven't done so already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You're going to get access to ad-free audio of the Locked On Cowboys podcast, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. Just go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com or check out the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, Landon, let's talk about Jonathan Gannon, because it feels like a lot of Cowboys Nation is upset with this potential hire. He's going to be interviewing again at some point this week. Why should fans calm down a little bit here?
I don't understand why they got riled up. Like, I mean, that's I guess where I would like to start is I mean, to me, I thought we all agreed that this was a very great crop of defensive coordinators that were available, that Jonathan Gannon was part of that. I think, some people maybe like down on him because he is also a former head coach and because the Joneses had preferred that previously, but that shouldn't disqualify him as a good defensive coordinator. Coach, look what we were just talking about and how this Bears defense was playing despite all the talent that they've lost. I mean, that's because they got former head coach of the Saints as their defensive coordinator coming in here, and Allen did such a great job in that defense. So I think it's really odd because, like, I see a lot of tweets about the second interview stuff, and there's just an outpouring of replies from folks about anybody but Gannon. Cannot hire Gannon. And I think, to answer your question, I think Gannon's a really good defensive coordinator. I think he showed what he could do by leading the Eagles to the Super Bowl when he was the defensive coordinator while they had a backup quarterback. I think he has taken what they have in Arizona personnel wise, and what you talk about bad ownership and stingy ownership, and it's taken the personnel that they've provided for him, and he's made incredible strides despite what he's had. I think he's done a really good job of using modern defenses. He's got a lot of cover 6 and cover 8 stuff. He uses a lot of really up-to-date stuff, and I think maybe that there's a stigma around him because of other coaches that he's coached with previously, because he coached with Eberflus. Is that really what this is? Because that's ridiculous.
That's a lot of it. I think there is, because he worked under Eberflus in Indianapolis. I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, why did you fire Matt Eberflus if you're just going to go hire Jonathan Gannon?"
He's a completely different coach since then. Correct. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, that's part of it. I also think I think there's a reputation from Jonathan Gannon that he's kind of a dorky guy. He's a little awkward. He's weird. And that some of the other coaches, like compare and contrast him to like Brian Flores, who is like uber intense. And, he might be a little bit more rigid with how he deals with other coaches and players. I do think there's a subsection of Cowboy fans that really want somebody that's going to come in here and change the culture and give the Cowboys some attitude. And I don't disagree with that at all. I wouldn't take it out on Jonathan Gannon as a potential, candidate, because he's a very good defensive coordinator in his own right. And the other thing is, if you're using the Cardinals' defensive stats against him, I understand why it's easy to do that because he's the play caller. Go do that with Dan Quinn before he got fired in Atlanta, and you'll see, he looked like he was an awful defensive coach, right? He comes to the Cowboys. He can just focus on defense. Look how much better he is. Look at Washington now that he's a head coach.
Look at him now. I was going to say.
Some guys are just better off as defensive coordinators rather than head coaches.
Or just in better situations, right? And I think, yeah, like that's the thing that's really surprising to me is, if it's about the fact that he was under Eberflus, I mean, he was also under Zimmer, which a lot of people really liked. I don't know if that makes it better or not, but I mean, he does a lot of different stuff. I mean, his coaching style and the way he attacks offense is completely different than Eberflus. So I guess if you don't like the fact that he was in the same organization as Eberflus at one point and under Eberflus at one point, then just go look at the tape and watch how he coaches defense and watch how Eberflus coaches defense and tell me if you see any difference. And I'm not talking about results. I'm talking about what's on the field, like the type of coverage he's using, middle of the field versus open versus closed, like big, huge schematic differences between these two. So I just think it takes a little bit of a deeper dive than just going to see who he played with. I mean, look, if you want to go that route, I mean, I was talking to John Owning about this very situation. He brought up an excellent point. This would be like expecting Matt Eberflus to run a Rob Ryan type defense because Matt Eberflus worked under Rob Ryan. Let me tell you something. We didn't see a lot of Rob Ryan in that Eberflus defense this year.
No, not at all. I have my favorite candidates in the cycle. Gannon's actually not one of them, but that doesn't mean he's not super, super qualified. And honestly, if the Cowboys hire him, I'm going to feel like, okay, you just made a big upgrade over Matt Eberflus. There shouldn't be this visceral reaction to Jonathan Gannon getting a second interview in Dallas. And the other thing is, we've talked about this for a while. We would like to see someone who has an expertise on the back end with the corners and the safeties, because they need a lot of work and development there. And that's what Jonathan Gannon specializes in.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly like, what the kind of situation you're looking for. I think that there's just, some misunderstanding about what kind of defensive coordinator he is. But yeah, like, look, I think if this was your hire last year instead of Eberflus, he would have been your number one choice with a bullet, considering all the candidates this year. It's just that there are a lot of great candidates this year that he's not being, pumped up as the best candidate out there. I think I've said all along, he's not my favorite candidate, but if he is the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys next year, it's great. Like you've made a clear upgrade in how this team is going to cover the pass at the very least. And I think you work from there.
Really quickly, if the Cowboys hire Gannon as their defensive coordinator, do you think we'll see them focus more on in the draft and corners and safeties? Or do you think it's going to be more loading up on the front seven and then kind of letting Gannon try to figure out ways to cover it up on the back end?
Well, if you're going to run a lot of cover 6 and cover 8 like he does, I'm going to think that you're probably going to want to get your hands on a lot of veteran corners. So I would imagine you're probably going to try to backfill the corner situation with as much, middle to cheap veteran corners that maybe you don't need as many man guys because you're going to be running complex coverage, so you can spend a little bit cheaper there and find just a handful of guys that you can rely on to at least be solid on the back end, and then load up the talent in the draft on the front end to see what you can get to put pressure on the quarterback.
All right, so Jonathan Gannon's going to have a second interview in person at some point this week, but there's another candidate out there, Landon, who could be an option. He's starting to turn heads in that building. We'll tell you who that is next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The championship round of the NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you're going to see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets that you like the most. Like, I love the Patriots this week against the Broncos. I just don't see how the Broncos are going to score. And now you can use one of your profit boosts to get an even bigger payout while the playoffs continue to roll on. So visit FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. One more name we need to mention here, Atlanta, and that is Daronte Jones, who has already had 2 interviews with the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. And according to Nick Harris on the Cross Chop podcast, shout out John, shout out Nick, he said that Daronte Jones had an awesome interview with the Cowboys. I believe it was over the weekend. And he is kind of a sneaky under-the-radar candidate. If you're not familiar with him, last year he was the passing game coordinator in Minnesota under Brian Flores. We've been wanting Flores for a while, but why might this be a better fit?
Well, first of all, it's interesting, right? Like, I mean, you think about how complicated the Flores system specifically is. They do so many blitzes. In order to compensate for all that, you kind of have to run maybe some interesting coverage stuff on the back end to kind of make it all fit, right? To get the numbers right. And so you need somebody who can teach that to your defensive backs, and it can be quite complicated. This is the guy who's basically, that's been his job, right? Like that, it's been trying to get everyone on the back end coached up on the finer points of how to play these coverages on the back end of these complex, blitzing schemes that Flores is going to be running up front. So I think the reason that you feel like this could be a better situation, is that we talked about the fact that Brian Flores is already getting head coaching interviews. And if you get him, it means that he, was left without the music, without a chair while the music was playing in the head coaching aspect of this. Right. So that probably means that, if you get success, he's not going to be here for very long. I mean, he could be a very one and done situation. And when you're talking about a guy that, is installing maybe a pretty complicated scheme, as we've talked about previously in the conversations that I had with Cody Alexander, I think it could be kind of a situation where you don't even get a fully installed Brian Flores scheme before suddenly he's pulled from you at the end of, one really potentially solid year. So to become a head coach, if you get this guy, maybe you get an opportunity to grow a little bit with Schottenheimer. Maybe you get some of the benefits of that kind of complex scheme that he learned underneath Flores, and then the opportunity for actually to let it kind of grow into its own thing underneath him, and an opportunity for him to become a better defensive coordinator instead of having to worry about him constantly being snapped up to be a head coach just because you had a little bit of success on defense.
Well, and he's also, and I get it. It's really hard for defensive-minded coaches to get head coaching jobs. But it seems like the ones that are getting the most traction in the NFL right now are like the really young ones, whether that's like Mike McDonald, Chris Shula from the Rams has had like 1 million interviews, Jesse Minter for the Chargers.
Yeah.
Jones will be 48 this year, and that's not old for an NFL coach. It's not old for an NFL head coach. But I think in the NFC, the oldest coach in the playoffs was Matt LaFleur at 46. Like, a lot of these teams are just going incredibly young. So Jones might be in the spot where he might be kind of pigeonholed as a defensive mind for the rest of his career. And that could be the sweet spot for Dallas. If you're getting the guy that could be here for 3, 4, 5 years, you can install a defense. You can draft guys for this defense year over year. They can develop in the same scheme. And that's how maybe you get this defense back to being average.
Yeah, and let me be clear: 48 isn't old for anything. Okay, so if anyone
it's ancient, Landon.
Listen, I still got a couple of years before I hit 48, but I'm not too many years, and I don't like how it's coming on me. So I agree. Like, I think it is a sweet spot. Like, you get a guy where and again, he hits the kind of other things that you're looking for here. A guy that's a great communicator. Obviously, Schottenheimer, if we're hearing this come out to the media, I think that it means that Schottenheimer clearly likes the guy as well. They've already had 2 interviews. That clearly says something. And I think if you come in here and it works, depending on what kind of scheme it is and how quickly it goes, yeah, it could be a situation where you get an opportunity to work with him for a long time. And if you get success this year, maybe you're able to run it back and kind of continue it without having to, like you said, constantly worry about him being poached by somebody else. So I do think that's why you're seeing a little bit more of these kind of interviews as well, like and Parker and some of these other kind of guys that don't necessarily have defensive coordinator experience. Maybe there's a chance that they can stay with you for a little bit.
One of the things I like about Jones is he's coached at basically every level. He was a high school coach.
Yeah.
He was a college coach. He coached the CFL. He's been at multiple NFL teams. Like, he's been around different, ages of football forever. And I kind of like that. Like, he's going to be able to add some, some fun wrinkles to this defense. Really quickly, between Jones and Gannon, which one would you like to see the Cowboys hire?
I mean, I think it would be interesting to see. I think, honestly, the calls on a lot of these are going to come down to who are the assistants that these guys are bringing with them, right? I'm interested to see who Gannon is bringing with them, because I don't know that he has necessarily like the greatest group of assistants that at Arizona, but maybe that's because of the organization. I'd be interested to see if he's he's promising guys, in these interviews, like, hey, I can bring along this guy or this guy. I think a lot of those kind of individual things will make a difference. But I think if you're asking me just on face, I think Daronte Jones, just because I think he brings something a little bit new. He's got some stability. I like Gannon. I think he would be a great choice. I'm interested in some of these other guys and the situations they're coming. His specifically, a teacher in a complicated system, that intrigues me.
After watching the playoff games, it's really hard to just go down for the, try to get a double as a defensive coordinator job, because I think Gannon can get this defense back to playing at an average level. I almost think you need to swing for the fences. It's so hard to win a Super Bowl. You might as well go out and try to hire somebody that could maybe get you a higher ceiling. And I think that's Jones. And I think that's why I'm so fascinated by him as a potential candidate. We'll see if the Cowboys make a move on him at some point this week. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free plus members-only Discord access and more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen to Locked On NFL podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.